Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Roundup for Tuesday, December 28th, also known as Championship Week in fantasy football circles. I'm Zach Ewing. That is Spencer, the Guru Urquhart. This is the Fantasy Roundup on bet.nola.com. It's brought to you by the Caesar Sportsbook, and we would like to remind you that you can sign up today for the Caesars mobile app and be ready for mobile betting when it comes down just after the new year. Go to nola.com/Caesars and get you signed up, and we can get you a $100 bonus. And you also get a bonus for local teams scoring points the week of launch. That hasn't been exactly figured out yet because we don't know exactly what week it'll be or who will be playing and all of that. But you actually will get more than a $100 bonus if you deposit money before the launch of mobile betting. So go to nola.com/Caesars and do that today. With that said, we will turn our attention to fantasy, and it is championship week in most fantasy leagues out there. I hope you're not in a league that leaves it until week 18 because with COVID and everything else and just your normal, the Chiefs have clinched the bye, so they're going to sit Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Like, you don't want to get into all that. Championship week should be this week, and so it should be a good one, Spencer. If not a challenging one, we've new COVID stuff every day.
Yeah, man, it's wild out there, and there's another thing. I hope y'all weren't facing Joe Burrow this week. Hopefully, y'all had him in y'all's lineups because that was amazing what happened there. It's so many big point totals. That was good to see. A lot of times in these playoff matchups, with wintertime weather being colder and stuff, there's a lot of low totals. But this week it was a lot of shootouts, a lot of action there, even with all the COVID absences. So yeah, hopefully we can. But it was that advance. Congratulations, and let's bring home those titles this week.
Yeah, I had to. I did not have to face Joe Burrow, but I did drop him earlier in the year, as I have complained about all year, complaining about my own decision. But having said that, in that league, I am in the championship, so I made it through, and I don't have to face him or anything like that. So we'll see if I can figure out the quarterback issues. Speaking of quarterback issues, you mentioned Carson Wentz. I just saw the headline: the Colts are discussing bringing back Phillip Rivers to start for a week. Which would be
Yikes.
Against the Raiders. That would be a truly interesting twist. If you need a quarterback, I don't know that you really rely on Phillip Rivers, but if you're in a super flex, you may not have a choice. You got to go pick. So I'd rely on him over Ian Book after what we saw last night. But that's all. The other headline with COVID is that the NFL and the NFL Players Association are talking about changing the quarantine period from 10 days down to 5 days. So if you test negative, you can be back in just 5 days, and that's for vaccinated or unvaccinated players. And so that may help some of these guys. You look at the Saints, they may get some guys back. Austin Eckler probably back for the Chargers. Different guys who missed last week. Dalvin Cook may very well come back. Paula says, hey, from Pensacola. Hey, Paula. And we will gladly take any comments you've got. Any questions you've got about your fantasy lineups? If you're in the championship, if you're in that third place game, maybe a third place game sometimes is more stressful because if you want to make the money, sometimes you got to win that third place game. That's the money round. Or if you're, maybe you're in the consolation bracket and playing for the number one pick next year. So we're here for you. You got DFS questions, we can do that as well. But as we always do, we're going to start with the look back at last week, and Spencer previewed it a little bit with Joe Burrow. And what a week Mr. Burrow had. The third highest passing total in history, 525 yards. He is your number one quarterback for week 16. Dak Prescott, it's good to see him. We talked about him a little bit last week, Spencer, and you said hang on to him, keep starting him, and you were right. 31 points against the Washington football team on Sunday Night Football. And some more familiar names there in Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. How about Zach Wilson? I hope nobody lost a fantasy matchup because of Zach Wilson, but he came up with 23 points as well.
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, he had that crazy run where he tiptoed, almost went out of bounds, and then got the touchdown there. And beat Trevor Lawrence, beat the guy that was drafted one spot ahead of him. So yeah, that was interesting to see. And then Joe Burrow, man, I'm glad to see him do that. Always fun to see a LSU product do like that. It just goes to show that team truly was that's probably the greatest offense in college history, and it's carried over to the pros. That's what's crazy about it, and fun to see because he is a guy that helped me out in a lot of leagues and DFS. In DFS, he was my top quarterback pick for this past week. So I hope everyone that filled out those DFS slates had him in there, because if him and T. Higgins as a stack, I said him and Tyler Boyd, which Boyd did pretty well, but yeah, the money stack was him and Higgins. That was just straight fire.
Yeah, if you had Burrow and Higgins, you cashed almost no matter what else you had in your DFS lineup. I mean, that was ridiculous. Let's look at top running backs, and this is how I was able to win even without Joe Burrow, because I had Justin Jackson and Joe Mixon both in my lineup. So that worked out real well. You get a couple, and I had Devonte Adams. So you get 3 30-point scores. It's pretty tough to lose. Also had the Dolphins defense last night, so that was 25 more points. So yeah, it was a productive week. Justin Jackson. Listen, this is why you got to keep up with the news. Austin Eckler goes out with COVID. If you were able to go get Justin Jackson, 34.2 points in a losing effort. I mean, the guy, it just kept coming with him. And the Bengals offense, listen, you mentioned Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase had a big day too. Mixon had a big day. T. Higgins obviously had the huge day. It didn't matter who you had. If you had a share of that Bengals offense, you were in good shape. Nick Chubb, a nice day on Saturday as well. How about Rex Burkhead, though, Spencer? You just, that Texans situation, man, you just got to spin the wheel and pick somebody.
Right. Yeah. And I was thinking Burkhead was hurt a couple of weeks ago, was going to miss some time, but he's played through the injury. And I got to give the Texans some props. I mean, even the rookie quarterback's done pretty well, Davis Mills, and they did it this week without Brandon Cooks, their top weapon. You know, a big upset over the Chargers there. Jackson did well filling in for Eckler. So for those Eckler owners that had Jackson, props, so you didn't lose much there. So yeah, this was an Harris with a hat trick, a touchdown. So yeah, a lot of big running back performances. But this just goes to show. I mean, look at 2 of those top 3, Jackson and Burkhead, guys that no one had in their top deal before the season, rightfully so. I mean, who's going to draft Justin Jackson or Rex Burkhead? But as we go on, it just gets crazier and crazier. So props to those who've adapted and adjusted in these crazy times.
I mean, listen, we hope like hell that we don't have another COVID-impacted season next year. But, even without COVID, you look at injuries and suspensions and things like that. The 0 RB strategy in fantasy drafts, it seems like it makes more sense every single year. In a COVID year especially. But what that means is you don't draft any running backs high, or maybe you draft one, but you kind of leave your RB2 spot for later in the draft. And what you do is you just start picking up a bunch of backups. You pick up an Alexander Madison, a Justin Jackson, Chuba Hubbard, and you wait for the carnage to start coming. And sooner or later, by about week 8 or week 10, you've got yourself an every week starter from one of those guys. And in the meantime, you are able to draft the other positions, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, higher up than you would have otherwise, because you didn't worry about getting all those running backs early. And so this year, certainly if that was your strategy, it made an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because a lot of those top prominent running backs got injured. And so I would still say moving forward, got asked a while back, and they have been on the show like about is 0 RB the thing for drafts in next year. I'm still going to say no. Like I'm still saying take your running backs early. I think this year has a lot to do with COVID. But for those that kind of saw through predicted all this craziness for this year and did 0 RB, might be playing for championships. And if he did that, well, it makes sense. But I always like building with running backs. That's generally the way to go. But in these times, oh yeah.
I mean, listen, I kind of go halfway in between. I like drafting one up high. And honestly, we've talked about this throughout the year, but I got lucky, and sometimes it's luck. The league that I'm in my championship in, I drafted Joe Mixon and Devonte Adams, and then Joe Mixon with my first 2 picks. And my draft was the night of Hurricane Ida. My power went out, and I couldn't draft the rest of the draft. And the computer basically did the 0 RB for me, picked up a whole bunch of wide receivers. Like I think my next 6 picks were 5 wide receivers and a quarterback. And I look at my roster and think, man, this is a mess. But later on in the draft, I got Michael Carter, worked out real well. I had Melvin Gordon, who's worked out fine, although I ended up trading him for David Montgomery, which has worked out fine also. And I have a stacked wide receiver room where if I had been smart enough to hold on to Joe Burrow, my team would be just unbeatable. And so sometimes it's luck, sometimes it works out, but I kind of accidentally did it this year because of the hurricane and the power going out. And, it has worked out real well. So every year is not going to be like this, but Derrick Henry, that wasn't COVID. Dalvin Cook went out a couple weeks. This week it was COVID, but before it wasn't COVID. It does happen. Christian McCaffrey, that wasn't COVID. So these guys go out, and sometimes the backups become just as valuable. So it is a viable strategy. It just kind of depends on what you prefer. Looking at top wide receivers for the week, T. Higgins, we mentioned him, 43 points, and Devonte Adams on Saturday, very good as well. Debo, A.J. Brown coming back from injury, a nice day for the Titans on Thursday night. And then the surprise of the week, Isaiah McKenzie of Buffalo.
Yep, yeah, Isaiah McKenzie. I was with no Gabriel Davis, no Cole Beasley. Somebody had to step up there, and he did the job there with Emanuel Sanders. Still a bit banged up, so he was really the only big surprise here. But I mean, A.J. Brown was one. I was in a 10-man league where I had a lot of other good options. I was like, I don't know, A.J. Brown coming off injury might be a little slow to start. Boy, was I wrong about that. He came out as if he had been playing all year. He's had a great game. Adams and Higgins, of course, did well. Then Debo, just money in the bank week in and week out. So yeah, a lot of the top dogs up there. Receivers generally are money in the bank for the playoffs. Like Cooper Kupp was up there too. If you have that elite receiving core, then chances are you've made it pretty far.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, you especially in PPR now that most leagues are PPR, boy, you can really rack up some points if one of these guys has a big day, and you see that with Higgins, 43 points. We'll talk more about the Bengals, Spencer. A lot of times I hate to rely on an offense to have 2 big weeks in a row because that's just really not how the NFL works. That's a betting strategy too, is like people overreact to 1 week, and so you go the other way the next week, and a lot of times it's profitable. But in this case, the Bengals playing the Chiefs in championship week, that game just has shootout written all over it.
Right, yeah. So it was a Cowboys Cardinals. There should be a lot of big ones in this championship week. The only downside of that is it's like you might be going against some of those high scoring guys. Like, yeah, you want those shootouts, but if they come back and bite, if your opponent has a lot of those guys in that game, and it's like, I don't know. just gotta hope the breaks go your way.
Yeah, no. I mean, listen, you get into the championship, it's a 1 week thing. Sometimes the coins just got to land your way. You make the best decisions you can, but as with any fantasy week, but especially in a 1 week scenario, there's only so much you can do. So we shall see. Top scoring tight ends of week 16. Your top guy was Mark Andrews of the Ravens. Kind of a slow week for most of the top guys. Kittle and Kelsey slowed down finally. Kyle Pitts had a nice day even without a touchdown. And then Gerald Everett kind of showing his face as a viable option. Yeah,
Kyle Pitts is like allergic to the end zone, it seems like. He's only got 1 touchdown on the year, which is maddening considering how big he is, how physical, athletic he is. But it just goes to show that he's getting enough usage where he's still an elite option at the position. Once he does start finding the end zone, he'll be right up there with Andrews and Kelsey, I would think. And then, Andrews is, to me right now, the way Andrews is playing, I would say for drafts next year, I was saying Kittle, but Kittle kind of came back to earth this weekend with his injury history is concerning. For next year's drafts, I'd probably say Andrews would be the number 1 tight end.
Over Kelsey as well.
Yeah, because Kelsey will still be up there, but he is getting a little up in age, and he has had a few off weeks this year. Like, I think Kelsey's, I'm not going to say his days of being elite are over, but I think his days of being number 1 overall at the position are about over. I'm thinking it's going to be Andrews being the top guy. He's just really taken over there in Baltimore. It's the clear-cut top weapon.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to at least say Andrews is in that tier with Kelsey and Kittle, and maybe he's replaced Darren Waller in that tier. Waller with health concerns, if he's healthy, obviously he's going to get drafted, but he may not be in that super elite tier. So as we always do, we picked an MVP, our fantasy star for the week. They happen to be from the same team this week. You might be able to guess who they are. So Spencer, you go first.
Yeah, this was pretty straightforward. I mean, I had to go with Joey B. It was just the highest score by a quarterback this year by 6.8. Wow, that's like
actually that's just this week, not for the year.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Point is, it's just an incredible performance there, and I actually am mad at myself in one league. The league, it's crazy. I've had a dominant team in this 10-man league. It's the same league where I benched A.J. Brown, and y'all probably thinking, man, he's like, how you call yourself the guru? You benched Joe Burrow and A.J. Brown. But listen, my other options were Justin Herbert against the Texans, and then at flex was Chase Edmonds. And so I figured with no James Conner, I figured he'd do well, and he did. He did well, and then Herbert did okay, but I mean, he's not anything like Joe Burrow. If I'd have played Burrow, I'd have won. It's crazy.
Expert. Expert.
Yeah, I have to revoke my title, man. That was a tough L to take, man. That league, I had killed it all year. Was 11-2 in the regular season. Had a bye week, thinking I'd be able to cruise to the championship. Money league, $40 buy-in, but just goes to show, man, it can smack you in the face some weeks.
It is the worst feeling in the world too. It's one thing to lose. It's another thing to lose because you made a decision and you left somebody on your bench and you're just watching them rack up points going, man, if I just could just switch it, come on, just let me have one mulligan and I'll win. It's the worst feeling in the world. And I mean, I think, listen, that may be a lesson. And again, some of this just comes down to luck, but it may be a lesson in overthinking it. Sometimes you overthink things. If you go with the guys who got you there, more often than not, you're going to be okay. It doesn't mean every time. It doesn't mean Spencer doesn't know what he's talking about. But sometimes it is just better to keep it simple.
Right. Yeah. But to be fair, I mean, Herbert was the guy that got me there. So, I figured I'd just go with him. And I mean, he did okay, but he just, not quite as good as I was thinking. And then Burrow just comes in and blows up.
Yeah. And he actually almost had more. He almost had another touchdown pass in the fourth quarter that got reviewed and wiped out. He could have come very close to setting the NFL record for single game yardage and added another touchdown. So my fantasy star is the guy who caught 12 of those passes, and that's T. Higgins. I'm sure y'all saw the highlight, the one catch he had on the deep ball where he just out-leaps the defender, high points the ball. I mean, you're talking about an elite talent, and I'm not sure anybody really thought about him that way with Tyler Boyd and with Jamar Chase and the seasons they were having. But this guy, holy moly. Devonte Adams, actually, I believe it was Justin Jefferson, the only other receiver who's gone over 40 this year in a game. 194 yards, 12 catches, 2 touchdowns. Just a huge week. And as you mentioned, Spencer, you had one of these guys in your lineup, or if you were lucky enough to have both of them, I mean, it was easy street.
Exactly. Yeah, I had Chase in some leagues. I didn't really have any Higgins shares in my season-long leagues because of just the fact that they were going similar in drafts, and I felt like Chase was a superior talent, while Chase, I believe, for the season's had a slightly better year. Higgins, though, as of late, he's been the guy with more defenses keying in on Chase. And while the Ravens, I mean, their secondary so banged up, they couldn't stop anybody. And they all did well. And they might have a little tougher time this week against the Chiefs, but I just feel like they've got enough momentum to where they're still must starts.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything, especially those guys in the passing game, they fall behind. They are going to throw it a lot. And I'm happy with Burrow in my lineup. I'm happy with Higgins. I'm happy with Chase. I'm starting all of those guys. Got a quick question on YouTube from Richard. Is Gerald Everett a viable tight end play? I mean, we just talked about him. I think he is. It obviously depends on your other options. But Spencer, I'll let you have the floor. I mean, I think he's clearly showing some chemistry with Russell Wilson.
Right, yeah, he's picked it up as of late, and he gets a great matchup this week. The Seahawks get Detroit. So, I mean, it's like I don't see him slowing down here. I see him continuing his recent surge and just, because the Seahawks don't really have much else outside of Metcalf and Lockett, and they're both field stretchers. Everett's kind of seems like the seam guy, a guy that gets more to shorter, safer catches, and he's a big body, so he'll probably catch a touchdown or two. Yeah, he's a tight end one this week, I feel.
And I'm not totally unconvinced that Russell Wilson's thumb isn't still bothering him. It's he's looked better the last couple of weeks, but I think he may be going to the tight end and those underneath routes a little more because the deep ball is where it's bothering him. I'm speculating here, but it's certainly possible. And then they were playing the snow last week, so that makes a difference too. But yeah, I think Everett, depending on your other options, like I don't think you're going to start him over one of those elite guys. You might not start him over a Dallas Goedert or a Zach Ertz or something, but he's down there toward the bottom end of the tight end ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I'd rather him, over like Higbee or Conklin or Evan Ingram, one of those like fringe tight end ones. That's man, give me the upside with Everett.
Man, Everett, I feel like Everett's floor. His
Yeah, and he's
floor is
got a
higher than those
decent
guys
floor.
too.
Yeah, and the matchup, yeah, it's trending up for him. Yeah, he's definitely a tight end. I don't know his percentage right now. If you need a tight end, then go get him if he's available.
You're watching the Fantasy Roundup on bet.nola.com. Zach and Spencer here with you. We want to get into some Week 17 stuff, but first, I also want to promote something else that we're doing that's really cool. It's called the Beat the Pros contest, and that's something we're doing over at bet.nola.com. It is free to enter. We're doing 6 of them throughout the year. The first one is college football, the New Year's 6 Bowls, and hopefully knocking on wood right now, but hopefully they all get played. But you pick the New Year's 6 Bowls against the spread and try to beat the pro, which in this case is our LSU beat writer Leah Vann. And if you do that, you are entered to win a weekend stay for 2 at Harrah's New Orleans. We're taking care of you. We're letting you go see a show. We're doing all that kind of stuff. You can hang out at Harrah's for the weekend. And if you play all 6 contests, so it's college football, then we have NFL playoffs, March Madness, the Masters, NBA playoffs, and finally Major League Baseball playoffs in October. If you play all 6 of them and you are the year-long champ, the grand prize is a weekend stay for 2 at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. So beat the pros. There'll be a different pro for each sport, for each contest. It's going to be Jeff Duncan for the NFL playoffs coming up, and then we'll keep going throughout the year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Go to NOLA.com/beatthepros. You can play the college football version right now. Make sure you got a profile, all that kind of stuff. And then just keep an eye out, sign up for our newsletter, watch the shows, that sort of thing. We'll remind you throughout the year as those things are going live. But if you play all 6 of them, you have a chance for that weekend trip for 2 to Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And Spencer, you're ineligible. I'm sorry, man.
Dang, yeah, I was like, am I eligible? No, there you go. But yeah, that's awesome, man. I'll definitely have to let my people know, let the Guru Nation know, man. I could be at the Palace, man. That sounds really fun.
That's right. You're gonna have to just sneak your picks to a buddy and have him make them or something. I don't know.
Yeah. If you win, then we'll both go.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. No, but it'll be fun. Go to NOLA.com/beatthepros, and you can get started on that contest with the college football. So as the new year begins, that's what we're doing here at bet.nola.com and Caesar Sportsbook. Really excited about it. In the meantime, let's start the new year off right, win you some fantasy championships. Waiver targets for Week 17. Spencer, you like Trey Lance, and I don't disagree with you, but I want to question you on it. Is it the matchup? Is it the rushing possibility? And where would you rank him? Like, what type of guys are you starting him over?
For sure, yeah, I'd say it's actually a little bit of both. I feel like it's the perfect storm. Like he's got that rushing upside, but if it was a bad matchup, like if he was at New England, I'd be like, nah, I'm not messing with that. But he gets the Texans, and I mean the Texans are, as we all know, aren't a very good defense, and their offense lately has been showing signs of life. So I think this game could be fairly high scoring. Davis Mills has done pretty well as a rookie. There 2 rookies there with him and Lance could be. It should be a lot of fun, and thinking that could be with Lance's rushing. Like even if he's a little off as a passer, he should still be able to rack up those rushing yards and be. I would rank him ahead of the likes of. Wentz is out. Let's say Derek Carr, I'd rank him ahead of him. Rank him ahead of Big Ben and Baker. Rank him ahead of. This is about where I draw the line. Be Kirk Cousins. Like I don't know if I'd quite him and Kirk Cousins. I'd say are really close. Like because Kirk Cousins, at Green Bay in prime time. I know Kirk's had a solid year, but I'd probably just say go ahead and play Lance because Green Bay's defense has been solid, and we all know Cousins doesn't perform well in prime time. So I'd probably say that would put him around in the 10 to 12 range. So I'd say he'd be a low-end QB1 due to the rushing and great matchup put together.
How about Trey Lance versus Taysom Hill, assuming Taysom comes back?
Oh, no, that's interesting. I think that kind of depends on the Panthers' COVID situation. Like, because the Panthers have a pretty stout defense. If they're relatively healthy, I'd probably rather Lance. But if they have a lot of guys out, then I'd say Hill.
All right. But that's the sort of talent you could be looking at. And Taysom, listen, before the Bucs game, and he wasn't very productive in that game almost by default. They weren't asking him to do much, but Taysom had some big fantasy weeks. He had a big fantasy week the week before against the Jets. and he had some big ones last year as well. So and against the Cowboys, he had a big week as well. Even though he didn't play that well in real life, he had 4 picks, but he still racked up a lot of rushing yards, still got you some points in fantasy. So it's, I think that's sort of what you're looking at with Trey Lance. Your other pickups there, Boston Scott, the Zachary native for the Eagles, getting some carries, and then Josh Palmer of the Chargers.
Right, yeah. Scott, I think, could be in line for a big game this week. Miles Sanders is out with a broken hand and a great matchup against Washington, so more opportunities. Kind of like with Lance, with Jimmy Garoppolo out and a great matchup. Just kind of things falling into place for them to have big week 17s, and then Josh Palmer too, with Mike Williams being unvaccinated, likely out this week. I think Palmer should continue to thrive in a prominent role there, and I think Keenan Allen will do better this coming week, but I still think Palmer and that high-volume passing attack has a shot to at least be a solid flex play.
Yeah, you just can't stress it enough that you've got to pay attention to the news. You've got to see who's coming back. If those guys all of a sudden, the NFL changes the rules, and on Friday you get some guys activated from the COVID list, you've got to be on top of it. I know everybody's got jobs or school or whatever it is, and you've got to, but put notifications on your phone for Adam Schefter, who, a couple of key Twitter accounts. Get that news, get into your fantasy app as soon as you can, and do what's necessary, because it could win you a championship this week. It really could.
Right.
My waiver wire targets, and I try to pick different ones than you because I like Lance as well, Spencer. Cam Akers is an interesting one. This kind of depends on your situation at running back, because again, the word is, and again, you got to pay attention to the news, but the word is that he may come back for the Rams and play against the Ravens this week, which is incredible in and of itself, that the guy's come back from a torn Achilles that he suffered in late July to come back and play this year. Like that's a medical miracle. But if he does, the guy's super talented. The only question is, they're probably not going to push him. So if he's only getting 8 carries, you don't necessarily want the guy. But how desperate do you have to be at running back before you would go start Cam Akers? Assuming he's activated.
Right, yeah, I would say pretty desperate, because it seems like Sony Michelle is the clear workhorse over there. But if something would happen to Michelle, like if he would get COVID or something, then at that point, yeah, Akers would be pretty viable. And yeah, he is a good depth piece. if you need to just add depth, he would be. If you've got a good roster and you would just want to add a depth piece, then yeah, he's somebody to keep in mind.
And then I went with Rashad Bateman of the Ravens. I really think seeing what he did with Josh Johnson at quarterback makes you think that no matter who the quarterback is, the Ravens are realizing that this guy is a weapon. Other teams are having to focus to take away Hollywood Brown. Rashad Bateman he feels like a guy in what could be a shootout against the Rams. Like, he's going to get targets, and so if you need some help at receiver, he's a good guy to pick up. And then, listen, you're in the playoffs now. It's a matchup time of year. And if you've got, say, the Packers defense and their fairly tough matchup with the Vikings, or you've got a defense that you've ridden for a while, but they've got a fairly tough matchup. Look at the Bears. They're only owned in 13% of leagues, and they're playing the Giants, who don't have Daniel Jones, who have been awful. They haven't been able to move the ball against anybody. They couldn't even move the ball against the Chargers defense. The Bears are going to score some points on defense this week. You could do a lot worse than starting them.
Yeah, that's a great streaming option, because the Giants right now just can't get out of their own way. Even Saquon Barkley is terrible right now. I don't even know if I'd feel comfortable starting him because the whole offense is inept. So yeah, the Bears defense is, I would go ahead and do it, because they're not a great defense. Like, they're not like the old Bears defense by any means, but just anybody against the Giants is worth a dart throw, I feel like.
Yeah, again, some of this depends on who else you've got, but if you've got the Packers or even the Cowboys, you've ridden them. The Cowboys have been great. I don't think you're going to bench the Cowboys, but the Cardinals are not the easiest matchup. They can put up some points. The Broncos are a pretty good example. They've been a good defense, but they've got to play the Chargers, who put up points. So, if you've ridden a defense but they don't have a great matchup, I would take a look at Chicago. They can certainly shut down the Giants, you would think. And again, we'll see what happens. But the Bears defense has played pretty well for a couple of weeks now. Let's turn our attention now to DFS. And again, if you are not still in your season-long playoffs, you can still make some cash. DFS, we use the DraftKings values here. Who have you got as a good value, Spencer?
Yeah, we got some good ones this week. Jalen Hurts against they get Washington, right? Yeah, that's a great matchup for sure. I mean, he's gonna, I believe, go off with his rushing ability and he's getting healthier, down the stretch. They're pushing for the playoffs, man. The Eagles could easily sneak into the playoffs. So I think he'll have a really nice performance there. Sony Michelle as the clear workhorse. We talked about the Rams backfield just a little while ago. I think at 5,800, he might be the value of the week. I'm very surprised that they didn't bump his price up a lot after last week being the clear focal point of that backfield. Now Daryl Henderson out of the picture, being on IR. Christian Kirk also a nice value at 5,800, what should be a high-scoring affair against the Cowboys. He's now the prominent weapon there in Arizona with no more DeAndre Hopkins. And Gerald Everett, another name we discussed earlier, against Detroit. I think he should have a nice week and is a really nice value there at 4,100.
Yeah, we talked about Everett, and I actually almost put him on my pickup list too. I know Richard had asked the question. He's available in a lot of leagues too. I think he's around 20% ownership, so I like the Everett pick quite a bit. I'm facing Sony Michelle this week in the championship. I'm worried about that because you're right. It's a total funnel. I hope Cam Akers does play and takes 12 carries away because Michelle's in a smash spot there.
Yeah, against Baltimore, who's reeling on defense right now. They haven't been able to stop anybody.
Yeah, and I'm picking on the same defense with my DFS values. I'm going with it, and this is priced up a little bit. 7,100 is not a cheap quarterback by any means, but I think Stafford has a chance to go 25 plus points, and so I think that's a value there because the Ravens. I mean, listen, we saw what Joe Burrow did, but everybody's been doing it to the Ravens. Aaron Rodgers did it. I mean, Matthew Stafford's certainly capable of going for 350 plus yards with 3 touchdowns. Against the Ravens. And I like Tyler Higbee. I mean, the Ravens have been among the worst teams in the NFL at defending the tight end. And so I'll take Higbee at just 4,000 and take my chances there. I also took a look at Odell Beckham. I ultimately went with DJ Moore there. And my thought there is, and this could change if Malcolm Jenkins comes back for the Saints, but think about last night's game. The Saints put Marshawn Lattimore on Devonta Parker and shut him down. And they often do that with outside receivers. Devonta Parker didn't have a catch. I think he only had like 1 target in that game. But it was the guy who lined up in the slot most of the time, Jalen Waddle, and does a lot of crossing patterns and stuff. They had a lot of trouble with him, and that's DJ Moore for the Panthers. So I could see him really being a value there. And my last pick there, trying to get a piece of that Chiefs-Bengals game, and Daryl Williams, a pass-catching back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire probably out. Again, check the news, but at 5,800, I see a lot of value there.
Yeah, I like Daryl a lot, because they're going to they've been, they get a lot of goal line opportunities, so he should be the guy with no CEH in the fold. And then, yeah, the Ram stack could work out really well. You got to think with the Ravens adjust, but the problem is they just don't have enough healthy bodies. So, yeah, I could see the Rams really carving them up.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens have COVID issues, and some of those could be alleviated, but they also have injury issues. They remind me a lot of the Saints. Started the year out well, and just in the last half of the year, it's everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and now they're fighting for their playoff lives. The difference is the Saints have a reasonable schedule left, and they still have a chance at this. The Ravens are in deep trouble because they've still got the Rams, and then I think the Browns left, so it's going to be difficult for them to make that work.
Right.
Let's move on to our Week 17 sleepers before we wrap up. And again, if y'all have questions, leave them in the comments on Facebook or YouTube. We will get to them here in the last few minutes of the show. But Spencer, going for a second straight week, a big week from Isaiah McKenzie.
Yeah, I think it's very possible since they're facing Atlanta and Beasley and Gabriel Davis both unvaccinated. So there's no guarantee that they'll be back this week. And so if one or both are out, then I'd say McKenzie wouldn't really be a sleeper at that point. But even if they do play, I still think McKenzie, with them being out of the lineup, I think McKenzie's going to have more of a role moving forward. And Emanuel Sanders getting up in age, he didn't show much last week. I'm thinking McKenzie may have, him and Josh Allen may have, got something going. Has got to, get, and they can get chemistry going. And I don't see that, them just taking that away. Like I think he may have just played himself into a prominent role in one of the most explosive offenses in the league. So we'll see if he can carry it over. I think there's a good chance he will against a vulnerable Falcons team.
And I kind of went the other way. I went with Devonta Parker, and I just mentioned him. Look, obviously he was blanked last night. That's why he's a sleeper, and he's been hurt all year long or been on the COVID list. But generally, when he's played, he's had a pretty good week. And the Dolphins get the Titans this week, and the Titans have really struggled against opposing receivers, particularly the number one wide receiver. Now, you could argue Waddle is the number one wide receiver, but I think both guys have a chance for a big day. I didn't want to use Waddle. He's not really a sleeper after last night, but I think Devonta Parker, love the way the Dolphins are playing. Think they could go to Tennessee and win that game. It's a sleeper, so take a shot. I'd keep him in your lineup.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he could bounce back because you would think they're going to start keying in more on Waddle. Hope maybe I don't know how the Titans defense plays, but I mean, if they're smart, they'll key in more on Waddle. It should open things up for Parker.
Yeah, that's the other part of it. And like I said, the Titans have had trouble covering outside receivers all year long and really going back to last year. It's been one of the Achilles heels of that team. And so I could see Devonta Parker being targeted a lot by Tua in that matchup. Any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, or you can go to Spencer on social media, at Spencer the Guru on Twitter or Instagram. Ask him your lineup questions for championship week or third place week or going for the number one draft pick or whatever it might be. And then go ahead and get your answers there, or maybe it's DFS. And Spencer will be happy to answer. Any questions you got this week that stuck out, Spencer?
Yeah, I got a defense question about should they play Philly or Miami's defense, and to me the answer was pretty obvious. But did you have a preference, Zach, or do you want me to go?
I love the way Miami played last night. It kind of depends for me on what Washington's quarterback situation is. What's your obvious preference?
I would say Philly because with Washington, man, they just look so bad right now. Heineke look clueless out there, and Philly's done really well on defense lately. They've got something to play for. Washington's basically out of it. Where Miami against Tennessee, that's a potentially tough opponent. So I would say definitely Philly here.
Yeah, I lean Philly. I mean, I know Miami looked great last night, and I started them, and they had a whole bunch of points. But you got to look at who they were facing. I mean, I hate to pile on the Saints, but you're looking at that. There was like a 7th-string tackle in there, and a 4th-string quarterback, and a 3rd-string guard, and I mean, it was just a complete and total mess on the Saints side of things. And so, yeah, the Dolphins dominate them. They have a decent defense. I think they're a decent play. But yeah, I think I would go with the Eagles as well there, especially with the way Washington looked last week. I think that about wraps it up for us. We're looking at some more COVID news. Again, keep an eye on that news. Carson Wentz out. And it's going to be wild. Bruce Arians out for the Bucs. Whatever will Tom Brady do? Yeah, whatever will Tom Brady do? It's just a complete mess. And so if you've gotten to this point, you probably know it, but you've got to keep an eye on the news, and you've got to be the first one to react in your matchups. It could make or break the difference between first or second place. Spencer, any final thought from you?
Oh, I'd say just, just gotta keep up with the news, and I'll say this, just gotta, no matter how it ends up, just gotta, don't break the chairs, don't go crazy in your house, just stay calm. It's all good. And just hope the fantasy gods are on your side. But we'll make it through. Let's win some titles. We got this.
That's right. And we wish you the best of luck, and we'll talk to you next week. We'll do a little fantasy football season wrap-up. We'll also look at DFS for Week 18 and maybe some DFS playoff strategies as well. So we'll see you next Tuesday. Check us out 4 o'clock on Thursday for At the Book. We're going to preview the weekend to come, including Saints-Panthers. We'll talk a little LSU K-State in the Texas Bowl and a lot of college football playoff as well. That'll be myself and Devin and Jim. So check us out right here on these same spots at 4 p.m. on Thursday. Until then, for Spencer the Guru Urquhart and our producer Patrick McKee, I'm Zach Ewing. Have a good one, everybody.